Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. I'm Vittorio Campanile, with me again, Alistair McKenzie. Hello Alistair, this time unfortunately we are not talking about a victory.
No, we're not. I was just saying before we came on, that our unbeaten run has finally come to an end. And I think we'll all agree, you and I certainly, and all of our listeners too, that it's an incredibly frustrating way for that run to end. Just a combination of things, but above all, incredibly bad luck for the defence to just fall apart as the match went on, highlighting the same problems we've been talking about for months now in terms of a lack of depth in that area of the pitch. So where do we even start here?
Yeah, I don't know. Are you more frustrated for the result, the referee, or the injuries? Because, everything happened.
The injuries have to be the biggest frustration for me, because it's not only the fact that they happened, it's the timing of them as well. So we lost Bastos perhaps about midway through the first half, who, by the way, was having a very good game up until that point. And Basta moving into a back three was something that had been suggested during the week as something that might happen. So at least there was the kind of reassurance that had been worked on to a certain extent. But losing De Vrij, you saw the kind of impact that has pretty quickly. I'm not going to lay all the blame at Lucas Leiva's feet, but with that defence in place of Lucas Radu and Basta, that conceded 3 goals in 5 minutes, and then going back to the issue of the timing, to lose Basta to injury after all the substitutions have been made is just incredibly unlucky, and you're left with 10 men as if you've done something wrong. Whereas, as you alluded to a minute ago, if anything, Napoli are the team who probably should have been playing with 10 men from what Pepe Reina was up to in the first half.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the injury is the most disappointing thing, because it will carry on to the next match if we are lucky, if not to the next couple of matches, which it will be even more dangerous. But after the first half, after Lazio playing so well against Napoli and so many poor decisions of the referee, losing that match is simply disappointing. And the thing is, you cannot say nothing. You cannot blame, Parolo or Immobile, etc., because I thought everybody gave everything, and Lazio was deserving the 3 points, and then all this injury. Now, crossing fingers, I hope that De Vrij was nothing serious, was just, he didn't train in the last day, so maybe for reassurance he went off before it was too late. But, yeah.
I think Inzaghi had said before the game that De Vrij had, how he'd been taken off against Genoa, and he was asked about that, and basically said he's got a bit of a tweak, and he was wanting to kind of be careful with him, wrap him in cotton wool, because they know how important he's going to be to the team. So I'm optimistic that hopefully that won't be too serious. But with Basta and Bastos, they're both hamstring injuries, and Basta's one obviously looked particularly bad because he was brought off the pitch on a little golf buggy. But with hamstring injuries, if they have torn or pulled their hamstrings, that is a serious enough injury to keep them out for weeks. So we're left with incredibly thin options in defence, and I was saying on Twitter just then, looking at our back four at the end of that game is just, it's incredible, because you've got a game of two halves here where the first half is a true reflection of what Lazio have been like this season. It was Lazio playing their own style, with Inzaghi's system, the way he likes to set his team up, and that's the kind of performance we've been seeing so far from his teams this season. Second half was just damage control. I mean, it's quite hard to be critical of Inzaghi for the changes he made in this game necessarily, because he was having to deal with so many terrible things happening one after another, that he really had to just try and keep a lid on the situation, and he failed to do that. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think this is going to be a move to a back four now, simply out of a lack of options?
I think so, but it's curious that we had a center defender on the bench that was Felipe Luis, and he never came in. Basto got injured, and Maruzic came in. Tefrai went out, and Murcia came in, and simply, what's the message? Simone Inzaghi doesn't trust Felipe Luis anymore after the poor performance he had with Vitesse, or there's something else he preferred to play with Murcia in a match that difficult. I don't know, but I think that Inzaghi hasn't got a lot of confidence anymore with Felipe Luis. The problem is, next Sunday, I think he'll have to play. Radu needs to rest, and at the moment, there are not any other options. I mean, I can see Lucas Leiva playing in a 3 defense, but in a 4, I think you have to have 2 real defenders. So Felipe Luis, I think he's going to play. Again, Lazio hasn't been really lucky. We said it a lot of times that the position where Lazio was really thin was that, the central defenders, and you got 3 injuries in 3 matches. It's simply unbelievable. Now, I don't know the reason of these injuries, even though they are all muscles injuries. So could we blame the trainer? Maybe. We'll never know, but for sure there's a problem there that someone has to...
Well, that's actually a question that Patrick Bowman's asked us tonight, which is, who's the physio and should they be blamed for the injuries? And I suppose Lazio do have a history of this, of injuries, obviously, over the last few seasons particularly, which does ruin the season quite often, and was one of the main concerns for the fact that the defence wasn't properly reinforced over the window. Instead, we've had Nani come in, and I've already done this, so I won't go back through it. But bringing in a guy who's a big name but doesn't suit Inzaghi's system and isn't the area of the team we need reinforced is just crazy. It just goes to show the short-sightedness of Lotito, who wants to hit the headlines with a big name signing instead of actually building the team in the way that Inzaghi would like him to. Which brings me on to another question, actually. Victoria from SS Lazio Norvegia. Good to see the international fan base spreading up to Scandinavia as well. Saying, should we have signed Paletta? I think at this stage we all have to say yes, because Paletta's a centre back. So to be honest, I'll go and drive Paletta to Rome right now if he's willing to play on Sunday. Would you take Paletta at this stage, Vittorio?
Well, now obviously, because we didn't have any more options, so we would have need someone there, and the problem is that the transfer market is closed. So at this moment, you have no options. I don't know who is a defender free available at the moment. But otherwise, Inzaghi can only pick from the academy. I don't think there's nobody ready for playing the first squad now. So we said it. We have to be honest. We said it since the end of the transfer market. We all were hoping to get a central defender, especially after Hut was sold, and it didn't arrive, and we knew that this will create problems. I think nobody believed so early, but this is the situation at the moment.
One of the first questions, we've had a load of people coming to us with questions tonight, actually, which has been great. So thank you everyone who's sent them in. We're going to try and get through as many of these as we can. But one of the first ones we had coming in was from MA, who basically just said, "Here's a good question. What the fuck are we going to do if Wallace, Stefan de Vrij, Bastos and Basta are out for any amount of time?" And I suppose we've kind of already covered this, but to the extent that, say, Vitória, for example, these guys are all out for, a couple of months, does that mean Lazio need to start delving into the free transfer market, for example, and finding guys who, perhaps have been released by clubs over the summer who are out of contract, but then again, players like that will take more time to actually train up to being capable of playing Serie A football? Or is it simply a fact that we now have to change the system to a back four, use Radu, Lucas Leiva, Felipe Luis as centre-backs? What do you think is the best way forward if the worst-case scenario, all those guys are out for a while?
Well, I think even if not all of these guys are out, we need to find a solution. Mauricio could be a solution. He's already there. He's not in the list at the moment, but I think Lazio can put him there, especially after all this injury. And you have to find a solution better than him. I think at the moment it's the best option Lazio has. So, but yes, it's not easy. I'm crossing fingers that the Vrij injury is nothing serious, because he was playing so well. It's not only the goal he scored, but he was giving the confidence to the players near him. And this year I think he was playing in another level. So it's really, really unlucky.
It's incredibly unlucky. It really is. But Christopher Thomas has raised the point of, do we think the team's just too tired right now? Fixtures coming thick and fast are really taking it out of a small group of players. They shouldn't be, because we're in September still. It is a relatively small group of players, but at the same time, they've only had one Europa League match, and this is the first midweek round. And you have to remember as well, there's been an international break. Yes, a lot of players will have been involved in that, but it's perhaps not the same intensity as it will be playing 2 games a week for Lazio. So I don't think tiredness should really be playing an issue at this stage of the season. Certainly not to the extent that players are picking up injuries as a result of fatigue. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
I think two things to say. One is that Immobile, for example, but same way Luis Alberto and Milinkovic, they run a lot in the 90 minutes. So I think it's understandable that they are tired at the end of the match. Second thing, Inzaghi didn't change that much the team in these matches. And so pretty much the same 11 play all the matches. And that's the reason why they're a little bit tired. Again, I was surprised that, for example, in the Vitesse match, Murgia was tired. He had to be subbed. But, Inzaghi asked a lot from their players, so it's understandable that they get tired. Now, the most important thing is start doing turnover, starting making other players play. As we said last time, we had Patrick and Greco that didn't play a second. So can we use it somewhere? Can Patrick try and play central defender, maybe that could be an option. Who knows? But yeah, there are a lot of players who didn't play a second at the moment.
The thing is, in my opinion, you've in the 3-5-2, you've got a system where you can probably get away with one player, for example, Basta in the first half of tonight's game. You can get away with having one player in that back three who's not a natural centre back, because Basta was still playing on the right hand side of that central three. He wasn't, he's got decent enough positional awareness to be able to fulfil that role quite well. But that's with Stefan de Vrij in the middle of that three and Radu on the left, who know exactly what they're doing. I don't think this is a system that you can really continue to use with a group of players who are completely new and being played out of position. So, for example, if you're talking about moving Lucas Leiva, I know he's played there before, but he isn't a natural centre back. So, say having Lucas Leiva alongside someone like Patrick in the back three, and Radu, who you still have to remember is it's not his natural role is playing on the left in a back three. So
I'm not sure. I think that's the perfect role for Radu. So, but again,
it may be the perfect role, but it's my point is it's not the role he's been playing in recent seasons. I mean, he's played as a left back in a back four for Lazio for years and years. So even if it is the right role for him, and I think he's done very well there so far, it's not something that he's necessarily, he's not an experienced campaigner playing in that position. That's my only point.
Yeah, and I agree, but I think that's his perfect role. And Basta played in the three defenders last year against Udinese, and he did probably one of his best match of last season. Of course, it's not his role. He can play there, but I think he can play there if near him there's someone very good like De Vrij. So with Lucas Leiva near him, it's completely different. Again, Lazio can play 4-3-3, and maybe in that solution, Lazio have more options. But everything changes, So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. What's in mind of Inzaghi, because maybe it's Nani is ready, so maybe switching to the 4-3-3, it's a better option. It's something that could work nicely. Again, what we can say, I think everybody agrees that Lazio made a mistake this summer, not signing another defender. Made a very good transfer market, but this mistake will cost.
Well, it's actually something Walid Mohammed has asked us here was why did Inzaghi risk playing Lucas in defence tonight instead of changing the formation to a 4-3-3 or a 4-5-1? This was at half time when Stefan de Vrij was taken off with whatever his injury problem turns out to be. I expect that's probably just out of wanting to keep it quite settled, because Lazio in that first half, were creating a decent number of chances, were retaining the ball well, and it was a very competitive, compelling game at that point. It fell apart quite quickly, but I wouldn't necessarily criticise Inzaghi for making that decision, although I do think in the future, if he has those options in front of him, he may well do it differently now that he's seen how kind of exposed that defence can become.
I think we have to be honest. Till Bastos played, Napoli wasn't dangerous at all. Lazio was completely in control of the match. After Bastos left, Napoli started to get a little bit dangerous, but still Lazio was playing much better than Napoli and was deserving to win. Obviously, when De Vrij came out, the thing the match changed completely. But the first half, I think everybody would admit that Lazio was playing much better than Napoli and was deserving the victory. Obviously, I think even if Juventus loses the two starting central defender, the match become a nightmare. So I think you cannot judge Lazio from this match because of the injury and the referee mistakes.
Definitely not.
But so, in the first half, where you can say something, you have to admit that Lazio was playing better than Napoli. And imagine the match, how things could have turned if Reina could have get the red card that was simply obvious for everybody, not for the referee, unfortunately. You were playing 11 match versus 10. That would have changed completely the match.
Well, Torsten Gustafsson said sincerely, what can we do with 10 against a great Napoli side? I think that's the thing. If you're going to go down to 10 men, you at least want in a way that it comes from a red card instead of it being an injury. But yeah, he makes the point as well that we were much better before Bastos was injured. But he's having a bit of a go at Lulic here and asking how bad is Lulic. I don't think Lulic stood out for me tonight as having a particularly worse game than anyone else, to be honest. I think he's somebody I've criticised before this season. But tonight I thought he was okay. One question I wanted to bring up actually was about Inzaghi's final substitution tonight. I was surprised to see him. I think the game was
ended. I think
it was 3-1 at that stage. Yeah. But you've got Milinkovic-Savic coming off for Murgia, and for Lukaku, I think it was, yeah. And Lulic moved inside into Milinkovic-Savic's role. That struck me as a bit strange because I thought he was Lazio's best player in the first half. He was causing a lot of problems in terms of the way that he could actually keep the ball. There's one moment that was absolutely sublime when he managed to move it through about three players, and his passing was really dangerous as well. That's something, to go back to Torsten Gustafsson's point, that's something Lulic is never going to do. Lulic is, is famous for his heavy touch, and he's not someone who's going to create and make those, balls for Immobile to run onto. So I was kind of surprised by that change, and I thought as soon as that happened, Lazio's chances of getting back into the game were ended completely once Basta went off injured. But at that stage of the game, looking at that team, I was really struggling to see how we were going to break down Napoli's defence with that midfield without Milinkovic-Savic, and kind of relying a bit too heavily on Lukaku to make an impact and Luis Alberto to create. I don't know.
It was one of the questions I wanted to ask you, obviously, because that was a strange subs. I think, and I don't know if you agree, that Inzaghi said, okay, the match is finished, we already lost a couple of key players, let's make sure that Milinkovic doesn't get injured and let's call him back. I think that's the only... For me, it's the only reason. I find that very hard.
I find that very hard to believe, just because Inzaghi has made such a big deal of the fact that his team will always fight back, and his team have the character to come back in games, and these 3-2 matches against Genoa, against Juventus, and he's always made a point of the team spirit and their willingness to never give up and so on. So at 3-1, when you've still got half an hour left on the clock, I don't think Inzaghi's saying, okay, this game is over. I really hope he isn't, because he really shouldn't be at that stage. You're at home. You've got 30 minutes to score 2 goals, and it's still 11v11, no matter what's going on in defence. That's why I thought it was such a strange substitution. Is simply because I don't think Inzaghi is that kind of coach who's simply going to settle for a defeat before it's over.
My only explanation is that maybe he saw Milinkovic a little bit tired and said, you know what, I'll bring him out. Let's be sure that we don't lose our top player in a match that unfortunately is finished. And honestly, I agree with Inzaghi. The match was finished, and I already lost 2 key players. Let's hope to not lose the third one. And after the injury of Basta, probably he made the right decision.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to cast an eye now towards Sunday, because there's a couple of questions here as well about Verona, who've got off to a terrible start in the league, and I watched a bit of their game against Roma over the weekend, and they look terrible. They've managed to keep Sampdoria out to a 0-0 draw tonight. Ben has said that it doesn't matter about the defence necessarily, because we can play a 0-8-2 formation against Hellas. He's probably right from what I've seen. Simone Lazio was basically just asking us who's going to play centre-back on Sunday. To go back to the defensive question, but I suppose we won't really be able to make a judgment on that until we know the severity of De Vrij's injury.
Well, you said you are available, right?
I've put my hand up like any good man would, really. So I'm just kind of going to wait beside my phone for the rest of the week and see what happens. But I suppose officially I am a free agent in the football world. So, you know, if they want to come in and make an offer, then
I think you're going to be considered. Looking the situation, you could be a fine option, I think. No, seriously.
Stop, you're making me blush.
Seriously, I think it's the perfect match for Felipe Luis. Verona shouldn't be that dangerous, so give the guy a go. I'm curious to see what's happening with Perche, because he was with the squad in Netherlands last Thursday. He's training with the team, so I don't know if he's going to be added officially this week after everything happened or not. But that could be an option. I don't think Inzaghi will make them both play together. I can see if probably switching to a 4-3-1-2 with Radu and Felipe Luis playing in the center of the defense. Maybe Patrick could be playing with Basta injured, and on the other side, I don't know if Lulic or Marusic or Lukaku, something like that, could be an option. But I think it's the perfect time to give a go to Felipe Luis again.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's unfair to judge him simply on one performance. So it's worth always giving, especially young players, the chance to make an impression. The one thing I would say is that tonight has kind of confirmed for me what I've suspected and said on here before, which is that Adam Marusic is not a defender. I'm sorry, he was almost entirely at fault for the first goal. It was crazy, that goal. The set piece, you just see him rushing off his man towards the ball, missing it, and setting up the goal. And for me, Marusic can maybe get away with it playing in a back five or in a 3-5-2, but in a back four, I'm not going to be very comfortable seeing him playing it right back in a back four. I really don't trust him at this stage. So, like you were saying, I would be quite happy to see Patrick be given a chance. Like I've said before, I thought he was quite good in pre-season and kind of deserves a chance. And he's another guy who's been quite useful in the past in terms of his versatility. So, you know, it's useful to give a player like that opportunities throughout the season in order to be able to use them when they're called upon, because it's so clear now that he will be called upon. Serge Alvarez, actually talking about Marisic there for a second, I just noticed a question we've got from Serge Alvarez, which came through Facebook, which was, why is Marisic playing as a starter instead of Basta? To be fair to Serge here, he did ask this before the game, and he said Marisic seems like he is more dangerous in attack, which I think we can all, actually, I was going to say we can all agree with. I think Marisic is a more natural attacker, but I think, as you alluded to in the last show, Vittorio, his impacts have kind of been a bit hit and miss so far in terms of when he's actually made an impression in an attacking sense from the bench. He was good against Genoa.
Yeah,
he was good in pre-season against Leverkusen, but on other occasions he's been quite quiet.
Let's be honest. I think Genoa was his best match, the only one when he entered and make a difference, like usually Lukaku did. In all the others, he pretty much didn't do nothing. And today, in the first goal, it wasn't only his mistake, because even Carrion was free in the middle of the box. So Lazio didn't defend very well, but it's even true that Lazio was really, really unlucky. I mean, Strakosha made an unbelievable save and the ball goes on the foot of another Napoli player. That's simply incredible, you know. So, of course, Lazio can defend better, but where's the luck? Really, really unlucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rami Algendi's been in touch again and saying, how are we going to play in the Europa League and Serie A with only one defender in Luis Felipe for months? And not resting Radu at all. So I mean, we've kind of covered that already. But I mean, it is again just it's something of more. Another question from Stephen Scarpola saying, why is Lotito the way he is? Has Tari ever had an independent thought? And then saying, Il Mister should play Nani at centre-back this weekend as a referendum on our window. Not a question, I guess. Which I completely agree with. I made these similar points tonight, actually, just about the transfer market, because it is crazy that all us fans have managed to kind of see this for the problem it is, and it still wasn't resolved.
I think someone that nobody can say that is that me and you has always been very honest, and we praise Lotito and Tare for good signings, like Milinkovic, but even Lucas Leiva, I thought it was very good, etc. At the same time, we were really honest to blame them, saying they didn't sign a central defender after selling Hurt, and saying that in the past there have been a lot of mistakes. So we have no owner, and we are free to say what we think. And we said it. The biggest mistake this transfer market was not replacing Wesley Hurt. And we still have to see if Immobile have a real replacement. So we can...
I think the worst thing from all of this for me is again, it's something I've mentioned before, but the fact that Inzaghi had actually flagged this up while the market was still open as something that he wanted to be addressed. And Inzaghi's already a coach who's attracting attention for what he's doing at Lazio, and yes, he does have a connection to the club, and I don't think he has any immediate intentions of going anywhere. But if he does continue to succeed and he continues to be ignored by the club president and the sporting director in the way he was this summer, because they're hanging him out to dry here. He said to them, I need a defender to replace Wesley Holt, and they haven't gotten one. And actually, if anything, they've brought in a player in Nani who doesn't fit the system he's using. So I think the more worrying thing long term for me is that if this is something that recurs at any stage, it's going to be something that fractures the relationship between coach and the presidency, and that ultimately could end up with us losing a guy who's clearly a very talented Serie A coach.
I'm not sure that Nani doesn't fit Lazio tactic and that Inzaghi is not happy of having Nani in the squad, but Inzaghi was really clear that he wanted a central defender. So
yeah, he was, and we can't say about Nani yet because he's not played yet, and I just mean he is a winger, and yes, he might adapt well to this system, but I do still think that Lotito and Tari wanted him to bring in as a big show of strength, bringing in a world, a globally renowned player, and never mind where he fits in the squad. Look, we've got Nani, plays for Lazio, and I think it seemed to me like it was a bit more about that than actually considering what the squad needs.
I see Nani starting next Sunday, I'll tell you this.
I hope so.
I think he's going to play, and maybe he's going to play instead of Luis Alberto, who need a little bit of rest. He played unbelievably well, especially in the first half, but I think he needs to rest a little bit. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Nani playing.
Yeah, do you think, along with the change to a 4-3-3, that's something I can imagine happening? Given the current state of affairs.
I think Nani can play even in a central position like a trequartista. But then the question is, do you give a week of match of rest to Immobile, or does he have to play even against Verona?
Well, we need to rack up the points, don't we? Especially after failing to get 3 against Spal, which now looks incredible, really. I mean, it was incredible at the time, but given how good we've been since then as well, it's becomes even harder to take. But I think it's important not to underestimate Hellas, especially because it's an away game, and they're a decent club. On paper, it's actually not a bad squad they've got there. They've obviously got off to a bad start, but I think it's definitely not one that Inzaghi should be underestimating or playing a kind of Europa League team in. I think it needs to be taken very seriously, because the next Europa League game, I believe, is the Zulte Waregem game, which should be the easiest game in our group. So if anything, that's when you should be looking to rotate the squad a bit. There's a couple of questions just on a couple of other things I wanted to bring up just before we finish, which the first of all was Gino Picano, which was on Facebook as well, and he was asking why aren't any fans going tonight. This was actually something a couple of people on Facebook asked us about as well. And I think first of all it's worth pointing out there were fans going tonight, and as far as I know, I think it was about 30,000 or so. But it's perhaps a bit of a disappointment in that a game of that magnitude, you might expect 50,000 or so to be inside the Olimpico. But Vittorio, I don't know, is it anything more than simply being a Wednesday night? People have work the next day. On top of that, the Napoli fans have been let loose again. They've had restrictions before, I think, in terms of how many Napoli fans were given tickets to the game, which were lifted for tonight. So perhaps the kind of increased number of away fans might put people off a bit. I'm not too sure.
I think there is no excuse. Lazio won the Supercoppa, beating Juventus. Unbeaten this season, beat AC Milan clearly. Inzaghi, that is showing to be a great manager, a great team. I think we should have seen 50,000 people there at the stadium this night. Wednesday is an excuse, but I mean, if 10,000 people came from Napoli to watch their team, there is no excuse for Lazio fan not to show up for this match so important. Again,
I think it's a wider discussion though than just tonight, though, isn't it? It's been a problem in Italian football, particularly for many years now.
yes and no. Yes, it's a problem of stadium, etc. No, Lazio fan has become very lazy with the excuse that Lotito, we are against Lotito, etc., etc. People stop going to the stadium, and now the team really deserve to have fans there, and they're not showing up, and really there is no excuse after this starting of the season. So, and we can say it, we see people going from Singapore to watch Lazio. How many friends do we have taking the flight from Manchester to Rome pretty much twice a month to watch Lazio? So, we have plenty of example. And you're in Rome and don't go and watch Lazio, then for me, you're not a real fan.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing atmosphere that's created when, most weeks if you're in the Curva Nord, but when the stadium's actually full, I do believe it gives an extra, extra momentum to the players, and that's something that players have said in the past themselves, is that the Olimpico is such an enormous space to fill. It's far too big a stadium, and we all know that. But you kind of, when you're playing good football and getting results, like you say, against big teams, then what more do you need to do? It's it is frustrating, especially I have to say for us. Well, not for us, for me as a foreign fan who would love to see Lazio more than I can. But when I was living in Rome, I went to absolutely every game, and saw some pretty nasty stuff in that season. But if you, like you say, if you've got the opportunity to go, then you should really be making the effort.
Even because the atmosphere there is simply amazing, and watching a match from your sofa is not the same thing from watching it from the stadium. It's another thing. It's simply a great experience that if you have the chance, you should be there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our questions done for tonight, I think. I mean, I do apologise. What's happened a couple of times before is that because we're recording these shows straight after the game, people have sent us questions after we've actually finished recording. So I'm very sorry if any really good questions come in after we finish recording, because that's why they won't be answered. But anyways, so in the future, just make sure they come in as quickly as they can, and we'll do our best. But thanks very much. We got absolutely loads tonight, so that was great.
Yeah, and if you have questions not related to the match, then you can write it even before the match, and we will try to answer them as well. So don't be shy. Let's put it like this. And I would close with the next match. Will it be the debut of Nani?
Yeah, I think you would expect to see him. It's hard to say whether from the start or not. I mean, it kind of depends on his fitness and how Inzaghi views his fitness in training. But I think, to be honest, most of us expected to see him off the bench tonight, and I think we probably would have done if the game had worked out like a normal match. Given that 2 of the 3 substitutions tonight were injury enforced, that stops Nani from really being able to come on and make an impact. And it's a shame, because in different circumstances it would have been very interesting to see what kind of an impact he could have made with Lazio losing tonight. So yeah, hopefully we can see him, and it would be, with all due respect to Verona, it would be quite a nice game, I think, from his perspective, to start his Lazio career against one of the teams having defensive problems and a bit further down the league.
I agree. And before closing, we have an answer for Milinkovic-Savic. Inzaghi just said that he had a little injury, so he already yesterday he had some issue in the training, so that's why he preferred to take him off today. So it was precaution after all the injury we had today.
Oh God!
Yeah.
I think if Simone Inzaghi on his way home tonight falls over and twists his ankle, then that will just complete the night for us. Have an injured coach though.
Yeah, and so probably we won't be seeing Milinkovic this Sunday, I presume.
Does he mention how serious the injury is?
No. He's just said that he had a little bit of pain yesterday in the training already. A muscle injury could be, but so that's why he changed him. Instead, he said that the Vrij, it was precautional. He was feeling pain and asked to come off. So that could be bad.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. We need a little bit of luck. I mean, after everything happened in this first 6 match of the season, Lazio was really unlucky. I think nobody can say the opposite. So I hope we're going to be lucky in the next matches. We need to.
Yeah, and I suppose the one thing to remember as well is that at least there's another international break coming up in a couple of weeks. So there'll be a bit more time off for the squad to actually try and get back to normal. But we've got some very important games, obviously, before then. So we'll see. But I think, Vittorio, from these first 5 games, we said when the fixtures first came out, Genoa away, Milan and Napoli within the first 5 games, and Chievo as well. It's a pretty difficult start. And for Spal to be the only one of those teams, apart from Napoli, to drop points again is crazy. But actually, I think if you'd offered us this start before the season began, we probably would have taken it in terms of getting wins against Milan and Genoa. So tonight was very disappointing for all the reasons we've mentioned, but it is worth staying positive in terms of the start that we made, because we know that the performance tonight didn't really represent the way that Lazio have been playing so far. So I think we can still be very upbeat moving on, as long as the squad eventually comes out of hospital.
I think it's going to be a big challenge for Simone Inzaghi to pick the right 11 for next match, but he showed that he's really capable, so I'm confident. I think we can wrap it up here if we don't have any more questions. Al?
No more here. So yeah, thanks very much for this evening, and see you for the next one.
Absolutely, and follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, subscribe on our podcast on iTunes, on YouTube, on Spreaker, and thank you very much for following us. Goodbye everybody, goodbye Al, have a nice week.
Bye.
Bye.